Hello. As an expert in your field and as a lecturer, you know what you want to teach. So you know what you want to achieve at the end of the course. In other words, your course goal. You also know how you are going to get there. That concerns the learning objectives for your learners. These are not new to you, as you already have them for your current face-to-face course. What is different online is that when designing your course, your learning objectives, the activities to attain them, and the assessment to check whether learning has taken place must be clearly spelled out to your learners, so that when they are carrying out the activities, which they may often do alone, they are aware of which learning objective they are trying to achieve and how to do it. But aren't goals and objectives variations of the same thing? While they are often used interchangeably, they have specific meanings which will have an impact on your course design. The goal is what the course will cover from the course's perspective. It is the big picture of the ultimate desired outcome. You have a goal as a lecturer for your course. It provides a long-term aim which is not necessarily directly measurable. The time frame can also be quite long. Meanwhile, your learning objectives define what you want your learner to be able to do as a result of following the course. They are, in other words, the specific steps to reach the overall goal. In addition to them being from the point of view of learners, they should be measurable and observable. They also have a shorter time frame. So, for instance, if you were a driving instructor, your goal might be: the purpose of this course is for the learners to pass their driving license first time. But how will this goal be achieved? This is where your learning objectives came into play. They could be as follows. By the end of the course, the learner will be able to use different parts of the car, follow road signs, park the car, and so on. These are more specific, measurable, and observable, and from the perspective of the learner. To ensure that the resulting behaviors are observable, objectives must be drafted using measurable action verbs. When defining learning objectives, we often refer to Bloom's taxonomy. The set of hierarchical models are used to classify learning objectives depending on their levels of complexity and specificity. So, to define your learning objectives precisely, you must ask yourself two questions. In which domain is the learning? It is cognitive, which is basically knowledge, for instance, knowing the highway code. It is affective, which is related to values and attitude, such as prioritizing safety when driving, or it is psychomotor, in other words, skills, for instance, the actions involved in driving a car. The second question is, what is the level of complexity of learning? You will be going through Bloom's taxonomy of verbs later, but for now, you just need to know that they are organized according to 6 broad categories, namely, remember, understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, and create. Courses usually have a mixture of objectives, which might go from initial ones that focus more on remembering and understanding to more complex ones of putting into practice what they have learned. If we go back to our driving example, the objective of using different parts of the car is quite general. How will you ensure that you include all the parts of the car? And how do you measure it? Well, you need to break this primary objective down into secondary objectives. These are basically intermediary steps that the learners have to go through to reach the primary objective. So, for instance, a secondary objective could be that the learner will be able to use the accelerator, brake, and clutch smoothly. Does this count as using different parts of the car? Yes. It is the only part of the car they need to know about? No. So then, you would have other secondary objectives to cover those. For instance, changing gears using the gear stick, and so on. Once you have written all the primary and secondary objectives, check if they are consistent. If the primary and secondary objectives are well aligned, your course design is off to a good start. However, if they are not aligned, it is also important to reflect on whether the objectives are necessary or just nice to have. For instance, how much do people need to know about the mechanics of the car in order to drive it? As we saw with this example, there are different steps and considerations when you define your goal and learning objectives. You will already have some which you can use and potentially adapt if necessary. The main change might be to draft secondary objectives to break down your course into smaller chunks. So in conclusion, as you go through the process of designing and developing your course online, always make sure that your objectives are coherent with the overall goal of the course, with each other, with the activities, and with the assessments of learning.